introduce Terry Conrad today. So there's a great bio of Terry that was not in our program, but was put out on the website and in the Zoom or the Facebook post. And I'll read that, but I have more to add because I've known Terry for a long time, since the 70s, when we were both very young, raising kids and living out in the hills of Madrid and Cerrillos, New Mexico. And Terry was one of the people instrumental in taking over a old coal mining ghost town and making it a community for artists and intellectuals, artists for sure. And so Terry really did so much there. And then Terry and Deborah moved here in 1989, which was a blow to me because two of my best friends left Santa Fe and moved to this weird little place called Galveston. And they opened art studios for himself and for Deborah. And Terry worked as a metal artist for several decades, doing graphic and architectural pieces, Nob Hill Gateways in Albuquerque, and things here, of course, too. And you probably know that Terry renovated so many properties in downtown Galveston, buildings that are iconic buildings in downtown Galveston that Terry renovated. He was also a member of the Planning Commission for the city. But then after Ike destroyed his studio, he went into Island Brainworks, which became a Sarasate franchise. So this is balancing the brain, very interesting work. And yet Terry's real purpose and practice has been for over 50 years of being a seeker and a practicing Buddhist, and then as a Dharma teacher in the Vajrayana tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. Terry's the founding director of Project Clearlight, a 501c3 that sponsors Dharma groups in the Texas prison system, offering Lojong and mind training correspondence courses to people who are incarcerated nationwide. He teaches these contemplative practices and ethics at the Ramsey Unit, which is a faith-based dormitory at the prison. Terry does remarkable work with the people who've really been, cast aside, and brings them new understanding and light in their lives, and that's very powerful. And I also just have to say, Terry and Deborah are the reason that I am here and have been here for 25 years. And so I'm happy to introduce Terry Conrad and his talk on the reality of duality.
Thank you, Kathleen. That was very generous. Kathleen and I can remember one of our early encounters at the Cerrillos Fiesta, wheeling our children in strollers, right? You had the twins in Calder were all in strollers. Yeah, we go way back. And I treasure that, I truly do. I brought notes this time. Try and avoid any lapse in memories, errors of omission or whatever, embarrassments. So, duality and non-duality. I mean, these are probably terms that are familiar to all of you, duality and non-duality. There's more and more conversation around this, particularly in the Dharma community, because it's always been a struggle as to how do we recognize what's skillful, what's helpful in recognizing what causes us difficulty, what causes us suffering. And of course, the early teachings of the Buddha were primarily aimed at relieving individual suffering. How can we relieve our own suffering, not depend upon somebody or something else to do that for us? Is there that opportunity? So just to kind of I guess, lay the groundwork in terms of the non-duality. Duality is seeing things as different, by the way. I'm different, right? You're different than from me. You think differently, you believe differently, you act differently, you look differently, right? And so it's that sense of difference that we understand as being duality. And that's also basically the cause of suffering. So let me just, I just kind of wanted to, with maybe kind of a quick brush here, anticipate how it is that we're not two. We're not separate, right? We're not dual. I was talking with Steve before the service, and he brought up a point about the Tao, how it's kind of the yin yang, right? Which we're kind of familiar with, seeing, how these two kind of work together, right? And so this line of thinking goes way back. It's not new, but we are always looking for a fresh take on it, right? So I want to start with just kind of life, okay? Life is very old. Life on Earth is very old. 4 to 5 billion years ago is the fossil record indicates there was life on Earth, okay? So we go back that far, all right? 3 to 5 billion years ago, there was single-cell organisms, bacteria, archaea. 2.5 billion years ago was the great oxygenation event. I love this. The great oxygenation event, right? Where we have this like blue algae, a bacteria that is quite flagellant in terms of oxygen, okay? And so it's spewing out this oxygen primarily in the oceans. The Earth's atmosphere at this time was primarily methane, nitrogen, and ammonia. Not really any free oxygen at all. So these bacteria are spewing out all this oxygen, and of course what happens is that all these organisms that were anaerobic now can't survive because of the free oxygen that's in the atmosphere. I mean, even our atmosphere today is only like 21% oxygen, right? Mostly we're breathing nitrogen. I don't know. I thought that was interesting. So then about 2 billion years ago, multi-cell organisms, are developing. Then we had the Cambrian, 541 million years ago, we had the Cambrian explosion. And this was an explosion, this is where multi-cell organisms now start becoming critters. Not just like, cells, 4 or 5 cells, but critters. And of course, this explosion, I like these references because we get this, you can see the dynamic that's going on in terms of the Earth, right? There's a lot of, it's slow happening, and then we can say, wow, we're at a whole different state. Then the age of the dinosaurs, 250 million years ago. And of course, the dinosaurs, as the evidence has been increasing, the large asteroid that hit just off the Yucatan Peninsula, in coming down, raised the temperature of the atmosphere to about 900 to 1,000 degrees. Just the heat of that thing coming down, and it pretty much just incinerated a great deal of life on Earth, primarily where the dinosaurs were in North America. All were done. So we've had these climactic and pretty traumatic events in our history. But anyway, the point is we get to this evolution, and there's a series of well, one of the things that's kind of interesting is the amphibian sea life, fish first, right, and then amphibians who have this many bones, 2 bones, 1 bone, right, structure in their fins, and they're able to come up and, anyway. So we've got, our probably nearest animal relative, the chimpanzee, and then a group of hominins and prehumans developing. If you watch this show on Netflix, there's a current series called Nature, and there's one called the Cave of Bones. There's several really interesting pieces on this, and the one Cave of Bones found a cave in South Africa. There's a hominin, pre-human, that buried their dead, made tools, and had petroglyphs. So much closer than we thought, a much closer relative actually than we previously knew. And this is fairly recent science. So then we get to humankind, and so we have basically 6 million years ago the hominin, to 2.5 million years ago Homo, the tool makers, and the ones that are burying their dead. Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, modern humans. I mean, it's quite a development, isn't it? It's an extraordinary development, and to me, it's evidence of how we're not unique. I think there's a tendency to think that human beings, humankind, is somehow unique to everything else, and so this brings home the point that we're not so unique. There's a connection here, a direct connection here. A family connection, if you will. So humans, us. I have this image of one of us sitting very early, like before dawn, and watching the sun come up, aware of all the lights that are in the sky, really having no notion of what all that is, all what we call stars. And noticing that each morning the sun's position is changing. And after a while, then maybe I'll put a stake or a stone here at one point, and then kind of start putting stakes and stones kind of in front of where I'm sitting, and then kind of going over to another point, and then witnessing that coming back, starting to get a sense of how things work. Thomas McEvilley, who wrote an extraordinary book called The Structure of Ancient Thought, begins his book with this poem: fish gotta swim, birds gotta fly, man's gotta sit and say, why? Right? I think that pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? We have this curious mind, this inquiring mind. We want to know how it works. So this kind of array of sticks or stones that are kind of, I'm making these observations with, noticing that there's like a couple of stars that don't move so much. There's others that are. This has been going on a long time, and evidence of that is that prior to writing, which is around 3,000 before the Common Era, we had worked out the precessional pattern of the Earth as it's wobbling on its axis, going through each of the 12 zodiacs, right? Like this early astrology is seeing these star patterns, right? So this is called the precession of the equinoxes. So the Earth is wobbling on its orbit like that, and it goes through these different zodiacs. That's something that takes 25,920 years. It's the longest astronomical event that's observable with the naked eye, right? We had figured this out. There's a sexagesimal system, 6, 60, 12 months, right? 30 days in a month, all was used to figure out this pattern, this wobbling of the Earth on its axis, right? 25,920 years. We had figured that out before we knew how to write. Pretty interesting. Thought to be like the Sumerian culture is the one. So you can imagine then some kind of an organization, right? Where now it's not just me sitting and putting these stakes and stones in the ground. Now there's kind of a group of us, and we're kind of making up stories about this, and And we're communicating this, and we're bringing other people into this, and we're having this conversation about ourselves, the universe, the earth, and everything that's going on. And this starts to feed into our social structure. To me, it suggests that these early observations, we were fairly settled. We weren't just nomadic, right? We were somehow kind of settled. Maybe not to the point of of agriculture, but we had figured out that we could grow plants that we need to live on, and we figured out that we could kind of bring herds of animals that we lived on closer to, you know what I'm saying? We had a lot of stuff worked out pretty early on. And and then comes civilization. Well, wasn't that a great thing? You've got warring hordes, right, moving across Asia and up into Europe and whatever. There's a lot of separation, there's a lot of division. And of course, civilization kind of reached I'm not going to go through the whole history here, obviously, but it kind of reached the pinnacle of its absurdness when we started creating colonies, where like one culture has to dominate another culture, right? Now, like when Alexander was doing this and the Greeks were doing this, he was encouraging all of his army officers to actually live wherever they went, to settle in, marry a local person, have kids, and create a family, create a community, so that it was like just an extension of Greece. Not so much colonizing in the sense of we're better than you and now we're doing you a favor by taking you over, right? Not so much that mentality, but more a mentality of just increasing the wealth, increasing the knowledge, bringing with it a lot of the things we just talked about, science and mathematics and whatever. But so with civilization, things change pretty dramatically. We started seeing ourselves as different. And that's a pretty big challenge. When I can make up a story about you, I mean, we've been making up stories for a long time. All these are made up stories, right? First you have the observation, you have the stories. The stories get translated into songs and dance. Stories then become philosophy. Philosophy then becomes religion, right? Or science, right? Kind of moves in philosophy kind of moves either into religion or into science, and sometimes those are together. But the idea that because you think differently than I do or look differently than I do is a cause for me to make a judgment about you, that story, because you don't believe the same thing I believe, then one of us is right and one of us is wrong, right? But that's kind of a more civilized way of looking at things, isn't it? Yeah. So the earliest Buddhist teaching, early Buddhist, some of the earliest teaching we have of the Buddhas, earliest sutras we have of the Buddhist teaching, he's suggesting that freedom lies in not being attached to one thing, liking one thing, and disparaging something else. I believe this is better, I believe that's worse, kind of we call it attachment and aversion, right? Liking this and disliking that. So one of the first teachings of the Buddha was don't believe anything. You can imagine how that went over in the Hindu community. I mean, they kind of listened to it. I mean, it made sense, but don't believe anything. I don't know. I mean, I'll let that sit with you. Just kind of the implications of that, because if my belief is causing me to feel separate, different, unique, apart, estranged, alone, then I'm going to be causing myself suffering, aren't I? I'm going to feel alienated. Maybe I'm going to, not feel whole. So that's a choice that I have. That's not something somebody else can make for me. That's something that I have to inform myself about. And so this is the practice of meditation, where we're offering ourselves the opportunity to just sit, right? Why, right? Just sit and observe, be aware of the kinds of thoughts I'm having, kinds of feelings that are coming up, right? And noticing that tendency to like this and dislike that, right? To feel defined by how I'm thinking, to feel I'm defined by what I believe or what I think or how I feel, right? To feel that that's definitive in terms of who I am as a person, right? So this is a little bit of a threshold, right? When we can just do that with what we call equanimity, just be able to observe our thoughts, our feelings, observe what's going on in the world, what's going on around us, with a sense of equanimity, rather than being quite so reactive and judgmental, critical, negative. Like was talked about this morning, we see the horrible fallout from that kind of negativity. Because you think this way or look this way or act this way, you're wrong. And not only you're wrong, you're bad. Not only you're wrong and bad, you're a threat. I mean, that's where it can go, can't it? So we want to find a way to diminish that. We want to find a way to kind of neutralize that within ourselves first, right? Yeah. I'm aware how I may be judgmental, critical, negative, right? How I may feel separate, isolated, alone. So it comes down to some kind of basic qualities that we can accept about ourselves. One is that we all have life, right? We're all life. Yeah? As we talked about earlier, there's a tremendous story there, tremendous history there, tremendous, extraordinary breadth of knowledge just in accepting life as what life is. So the meditation part is also recognizing that life has awareness. Life can't exist without awareness. We have to have we have these like sight, sound, smell, taste, thought. We have, this is essential to our survival, is having awareness, isn't it? We have to be able to perceive what's going on around us, right? So the third thing we have is virtue. This is always interesting to have this conversation in the prison. You know? Your essential nature is life, awareness, and virtue. That's essential to who you are. Why is virtue essential to who we are? Because we can't live without connection. We can't live, we won't survive if we're not connected, if we're not joined, if we're not together, right? And virtue is our capacity to connect, to love, essentially to love, right? What is virtue? Love, right? So that's essential to who we are, right? Cognizance is essential, right? We have to be able to perceive, make a discernment about what it is we're perceiving. Is it safe, dangerous, healthy, unhealthy, right? It's essential, isn't it? We're talking, how life survives, how we can get on as a living being, right? Life, awareness, virtue, cognizance. We have cognizance. And of course, over the millennia, our brain has increased in size as we have access to good quality protein, and experiences broaden. Our brain has gotten bigger. We're able to do extraordinary things. We not only can, our cognizance is not only be able to discern, it's also we can imagine. With tremendous imagination, creativity. And the last thing that's essential to our life is intention. Intention. we can have an intention. We have an intention to come and join in the fellowship. We have an intention to make a livelihood in certain ways. We have an intention to increase our knowledge, to increase our relationships. Right? Intention is essential. So these are kind of the 5 essentials. In early Buddhism, it was called the 5 skandhas, and they were used to identify how there's not this sense of a self that's in charge, but that there's this, we're more than just this idea of a sense of a self. There's much more to us. Hope that's making sense. So this is the non-duality then. We've talked about the reality and how we got here, where we are, who we are. The non-duality then is being aware that we're not alone. This is not unique just to me or to you or because of the way we look or where we live or what language we speak, right? That there is a universal aspect to us, a non-dual kind of wholeness to us. Wholeness, holiness, right? Holiness, wholeness. You get the, yeah. So when Jesus taught in the second covenant, when Jesus taught, love God, love yourself, love your neighbor. That's very complete, isn't it? Very complete. Right? Love God, love the universe, love, and God, is a good reference. Something much bigger, something much more whole, much more complete. It's interesting to me that theoretical physicists today are looking at the possibility that the essential nature of everything in the universe is consciousness. I mean, this is getting really interesting. In fact, there's one physicist that has made the comment, we're going to have a mathematical formula for consciousness. Right? And when that happens, he said, then it's going to be unbelievable. I don't know, maybe that makes sense to some of you. Like, we had electricity. We saw lightning and, we kind of knew about electricity, but until we had a mathematical formula for electricity, we didn't know what to do with it, right? Once we had that, then all of a sudden now we can calculate, we can formulate, we can fabricate, we can design, we can build, right? Because we have a basis. So to me, that's kind of interesting, right? That we could have that. So whatever we want to use as a reference for non-duality, totality, universality, I mean, there's so many different ways to look at it. So the implication here, to me, is that we can be at peace, we can have happiness, we can have well-being, if we have this sense of wholeness, right? This sense of totality, right? And recognize that humankind, we are of humankind, right? We're not just of Galveston, we're not just Texans, we're not just Americans, we are of humankind. And our expression of that recognition is kindness. Kindness is our basic practice. Recognizing that we are of a kind. Filtering out all the visuals, all the politics, all the geography, all the aspects. Just recognizing that we are of a kind is kindness. And that our basic, most essential practice is being kind. The Dalai Lama at one point said, kindness is my religion. And he got it, he gets that, how essential that is, how important that is. So I'll leave you with kindness. Okay? I don't know, at one point I was doing monthly studies here at Unitarian Church. We did ethics class, whatever. And I don't know, someone is interested in pursuing some of these ideas and would like to meet monthly or something like that. Also, I teach a class at Ollie, a meditation class at Ollie, and that's starting up in October. And if you're interested in pursuing this conversation in this thread, but basically learn how to meditate. Right? So let me open it up. I mean, I like to say I'm a teacher, not a preacher. So if something I've said has sparked a query, anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to shout out. Yeah, it's really the heart of it. It's the heart of us. Yeah. No. Yeah. It's a difference between sympathy and empathy, right? Sympathy, there's still a little bit of separation there, right? Oh, I have this for you, and too bad about you. But empathy is I am you, right? So that's kindness. Yeah. And of course, the product of kindness is going to be compassion, right? Compassion is love in action. Kindness is or compassion is how I do love, right? Right. And so kindness, empathy, compassion, they're of a set. Yeah, good. Anything else? Comment or questions? Please. Hey. What's to be done? What? With the correction? Oh, aggression. It's a hard one, isn't it? It's a hard one. I mean, of course, our most powerful means is to live by example, right? I mean, if we just kind of all agree that we're not going to be critical, negative, judgmental with ourselves, right? Aggression is starting here, isn't it? Right? But if I can see that I'm no longer, that we're not so different, whatever it is you're going through, however it is you feel is not so different, right? So it has to begin with ourselves. I have to have this insight that that I can be kind to myself, less critical, negative of myself. So in the meditation, I'm noticing if any negativity is coming up. I'm noticing the tendency to make a judgment about myself, right? To be critical about myself, right? This doesn't mean that anything goes. I mean, now there's still the discernment, isn't there? I can still discern what's appropriate. But if I'm being less negative, less critical, less judgmental, then I have the opportunity to see my part. I'm frustrated, I'm irritated, I'm angry. Why is that? Is it your fault? Should I blame you? What's my part? Right? What did I expect? What did I assume? Right? What did I expect? That's my part, isn't it? So it has to begin with us individually. Right? Collectively, all the mechanisms are there. We have laws, we have so-called justice, we have so-called, right? I mean, we have all the mechanisms there to deal with it. We're in a difficult time right now. It's okay to lie. It's okay to be deceptive, right? I mean, I can remember how if somebody said, like I remember when I was a kid, the Colgate toothpaste made a claim on television, right? That they can like make teeth white or something, right? And they were held accountable legally because it was a fabrication. They couldn't actually do that. Now you can say anything you want, right? We're in a strange time. It's a difficult time, but it's a good question. We need to address it. Yeah. Please. Right. Yeah. No, my bad. Yeah. Not necessarily. No, I mean we still have discernment, right? I can see that this is dangerous. I can see that this is inaccurate, right? That's the discernment. We have that. And again, we have that choice, don't we? And I think the challenge now is that people are afraid to speak out. They're afraid to challenge it. Oh, maybe I'll alienate a few voters or something. Maybe I'll lose some customers. I'm hesitant to really hold myself accountable. I can remember my wife she had a boutique in downtown, and she got into it with a client. I had my office in the back of the boutique, and she got into it with a client one day and just let loose an expletive, like, you know what you can do, right? And it was shocking, but at the same time, it was awakening, right? I mean, her strength was her willingness to speak out, right? And I found it really admirable. I mean, it was like, what? But yeah, it's a good point. We need to be careful how we're listening. Well, it's good you bring up joy. I mean, joy is the expression of love. It's a recognition of love, isn't it? I mean, we remember a joyful moment, and usually there's a loved one involved. Is that accurate? I mean, it's like a loving experience, either in terms of ourself and nature, or ourself and another person, right? Um, we like a sunset can just, the right time and space can just be absolutely joyful. I mean, I remember at my son's wedding, uh, when his bride to be or his wife to be his bride was walking down the aisle, I was watching him, and the joy on his face was, you know, I mean, we know what it is, right? We know what joy is. So we know that it isn't negativity. It isn't being critical, negative, judgmental. But yeah, joy should definitely factor in. I think there's tremendous joy in kindness, right? When someone extends a kindness to you, I mean, you feel great, don't you? Yeah. Here, I've got all these groceries. You go ahead of me. You know? Oh, here, you need to get out. You need to make that exit. Here, go ahead and get in front of me. I mean, just these little things like that. I invite inmates to just make sure every day they notice someone extending a joyful or a kindness to them, right? Just a smile, a pat on the shoulder, heads up. Just notice that. Every day, notice, and every day be aware of when you're extending a kindness to someone else. At the end of the day, like before you go to sleep, just bring to mind your day and notice where there was kindness. Either you were receiving it or extending it during your day, and it makes your life more joyful. That's a guarantee. And if it turns out not to be true, all your misery will be cheerfully refunded. Anything else? Yeah, please. Hey, Rick. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a very popular story. We have. Yeah, we still have a lot of stories too, don't we? We still have a lot of stories that aren't accurate, aren't true. You know? And that's where that's what we're looking out for today. Anybody else? Yes, please. Yeah, yeah. Very good. All right, friends. Thank you.